Well, welcome again to the Alan Hudson Podcast. We've got a special tartan edition for you today. Our guest is coming all the way from Ayrshire, and his name is Jimmy McCalliog. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Tony. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. And in case anyone out there has never seen our podcast before, all our shows are available on the YouTube channel. If you've not subscribed before, it'd be a great favour to us if you can click on the subscribe button. That will be much appreciated. Alan, I'm sure you've got words of welcome to issue to Jim today.
Yeah, of course. Goes back to when I was a kid, and Jim was the new kid on the block, you could call it, at the bridge. We all know about Terry Venables was the main figure at the bridge, and after having a quick word with Jimmy, I realised that he was responsible for a lot that went on in every club he went to. Terry, he was that powerful figure, but I could never understand why Jimmy left. That was the thing, because he was so talented at that time, and he looked like, it was a type of player that Chelsea needed at that time. Very, very different from Venables. Venables was a good player. He was, but Jim had that little bit of something extra. Would I be right, Jim? I think as an inside forward, you mentioned earlier on that you could play up front as well. Probably that was a reason why you could beat people a lot better. Terry was very limited in what he did, I thought, and that's no disrespect. But if I was to focus my game on anyone, it would be more you than Terry, because I'd like to go past people and play 1-2s off people, and I see you as that player, and that's why I couldn't understand why you left Stamford Bridge.
Yeah. The thing was, I thought really Terry was a wing half, Alan.
Yeah.
I thought Terry should have played more deeper. But the way it worked out, they had Johnny Hollins there, and Terry moved to inside left. Well, I think Terry was better as a wing half. He had a lot of talents, a lot of very intelligent player, always thinking about things. I remember hours and hours of practice with Terry after training. Him and Tommy Charmer. It was great. We used to try free kicks, set pieces, corner kicks, penalty kicks. We used to do a lot of stuff on the ball, extra training. But I think what you've said about Terry, I think that was spot on.
Well, I think, sorry, Jim, I think you're right. I think, and so it proved to be, because he went to QPR, and basically that was his position at QPR.
Yes.
And had that have happened at Chelsea, and Boyler's made a great point when he was on the show, he even before he came on the show, he said to me one day we were out, he said, John Hollins was in the wrong position. He should have been a fullback.
Yeah.
And I think he was right. And strangely enough, John Hollins went to Arsenal and they put him as right back. So
That's
I think
right.
he was, but that would have fell in nicely if he would have slotted into that position with Terry wing half and Johnny. I think Johnny would have been a great right back, because he had the pace, and he could run all day, get up and down. And I think it'd been a perfect position where he closed people down. So maybe that is the way we look at it now. What maybe would we have looked at it back then?
Yeah.
Because when I got in the side, I was always kind of miffed in some way, like a little bit like you were probably with Terry, thinking that you were more for that role. Johnny Hollins, because Dave was a favourite of Dave, he would get. It would take all the free kicks, everything, and I thought that was what's going on here, and I think in the modern, especially if you look at the modern game now, we would be the kind of players to get these things over the wall and round like that, you know.
Yeah.
Where Johnny was more of a power, you know. He could hit long balls or whatever.
Yeah, that's hitting the nail on the head, really, Alan. He could strike a ball. He knew he could strike a ball, but as regards the finesse and the culture and the craft, he wasn't that kind of midfield player. And no. I think John has made a good point. I think he could get up and down. He would be absolutely ideal for that. But I thought that as well. I thought maybe Tommy Docherty would put Terry on the right side and let me go alongside Terry. But I don't know why, but he never tried that. So, I mean, that was his thoughts. But the thing was, at Chelsea then, we had probably the best fullback in the game, and that was Ken Solito. Ken was so unlucky. Ken was a fabulous player. I mean, the ball would come to him in the 18-yard box, and he would kill it and pass it out. He was tremendous, and him and Eddie together, they were great, because Eddie could run all day up and down that left-hand side, but so could Ken. Ken, if I might say so, timed his runs better, and we got more results from Ken than we actually did from Eddie. But Eddie was a great player and a very good defender.
Yeah. Would I be right in saying that Ken would have played in the '66 World Cup team, Jimmy?
Without a shadow of a doubt. George Cohen would never have seen an England jersey if Ken would have kept going, honestly, Alan. And you're a Fulham fan. So, you know, that was, and I like George Cohen, but George Cohen was a bit like Paul Reaney at Leeds. He could run all day and he filled in, and, you know, Ken was classy. He was a classy player.
Yeah, yeah.
I was in the stand the day they played Sheffield Wednesday, and I'll never forget it. And I remember the Sheffield Wednesday left winger going at Ken, and he was going in and out, and he then made a move, and Ken's studs stuck in the ground, and he turned, and that was when he done his knee. And although he tried to come back and all the rest of it, he just wasn't the same player again. But
no.
Ken was a fabulous player.
Yeah, I played a couple of times in the reserves when I was coming through, and he was never gonna come back after an injury like that. But let's switch over to, we were kind of being cut off. You were saying, Jimmy, about the Blackpool situation. It all went pear-shaped in Blackpool, mainly down to Tommy, his handling of the case. How did you see that?
Yeah, well, the thing was, me and Johnny Boyle, we were roommates together, and we went out that night, and so did the rest of the players, and everybody was in for the curfew was 11 o'clock, and we were all in, and me and Boylers just went to bed. And the next morning we come down the stairs, and there it was, cameras clicking, everything like that. We thought, okay, we know it's an important game, but it's a bit early in the morning for cameras clicking. And we went in for breakfast with our teammates, and there was only Harry Medhurst in there, I think, and somebody else. And we didn't have a clue what was going on. And I said to Harry Med, I said, "Where's everybody, Harry?" And he looked at me and he said, "Stop taking the piss." And I says, "What do you mean, Harry?" He says, "What I said." I said, "Where's all the boys? I'm just asking a question." And he said, "Just leave it, Jim." So I thought, well, okay. And then when we'd finished breakfast, we had to be on the bus for 10 o'clock. Well, there was only 6 of us on the bus, and Tommy Docherty and Harry Med. It was the weirdest situation you ever could imagine. We got the bus, went to the training ground, while we were on the bus, the boss, Tommy Docherty, says, don't speak to the press when we get to the training ground. I don't want anybody speaking to the press. We went into the training ground, and he told us in there what happened. And he said, I've sent 8 of the players home, and I don't want anybody discussing it with anybody. And it was such a shock, Alan. I mean, we were playing Burnley on the Saturday, and Burnley were mid-table, and we were going for the league. And to be honest, you'd have taken us even at Turf Moor. Burnley weren't a bad side, and we got beat 6-2 because we pulled in players that had never played in the first team. The other surreal happening was that the players that had been sent home all came to the game and came in the dressing room. So can you imagine that dressing room where, they're not going to play, but they're in the dressing room. There's a boss walking around like a whatever, and the lads were there. It was horrendous. And within, I think it was about 8-10 minutes, we were 2-0 down to Burnley, and that wouldn't have happened. And we ended up losing 6-2.
Yeah.
So that to me was the beginning of the end, because and all the time I'd been at Chelsea, I loved the club. I loved the atmosphere in the dressing room. There was some wonderful players in there in the dressing room, and there was great players going to come along, i.e. yourself, Peter Osgood. There was more to come, and Chelsea was a club to be at. And the scouting system at Chelsea was amazing. And the other thing was the youth coach. He was amazing as well, Dickie Foss. He was tremendous. I remember when Oz, I played in reserves on the Saturday, and Peter played in the juniors. And just before we got on the coach, Dickie Foss came to me and had a word with me. He says, Jim, you're a little bit more experienced. He says, I've got a young lad coming here tonight, and we were playing West Ham in the Youth Cup at Upton Park. He says, I want you to look after him. He says he played in the juniors on Saturday and he did well, but he's raw. But he says, I'm sure you'll enjoy playing with him. And as we all know now, that was Ozzy starting. Ozzy came in the dressing room, like a big lanky kid, kind of, and we're all kind of looking at him. And then he sat down beside me, because obviously back then we used to be 1 to 10. You would sit next wherever they put your number up on the peg. And I spoke to Oz and I says, you okay? And he says, no. He says, I'm shaking. He says, I'm very nervous. You wouldn't believe it. And I says, what? I said, how did you do on Saturday? He says, yeah. He said, I loved it. He said, it was great. I says, what are you expecting tonight? He says, well, it'll be a tough game. I says, yeah. I said, it'll be a tough game. But the thing is, Peter, you're here for a reason. I says, Dickie Foss likes the look of you. So what you need to do is just go out and show what you've got. And he went out and we beat West Ham 5-2 that night. I think me and Ozzy got 2 each. So, that was the start of Ozzy. But that was the club, Alan, the players that Chelsea got, the scouting system. It was amazing. Tommy Docherty walked in to a young team, and they didn't spend a lot of money, but then of course they had the right people in the right places. Dickie Foss, there was another Dickie, I can't remember his second name, maybe you remember his second. He was the trainer, but then of course the coach was Dave Sexton. Dave was a lovely guy, don't get me wrong, but Dave, in my opinion, tended to favour hard-working players. He didn't He liked the luxury that he had Alan Hudson in the team, Peter Osgood in the team, but he would look at it a wee bit differently, because I think Dave was quite a hard-working player himself. He wasn't always the cleverest of players or something like that, but I think that was Dave. But as a young boy myself, I had time for Dave, and Dave was always available in the afternoon to take anybody training, which I thought was great. And it was a fantastic club. And then that Blackpool night out thing. There's no saying we would have won the league, but we were in contention, and we won the League Cup. We just got beat in the semi-finals of the FA Cup to Liverpool, and now we were in the running for the league. And if we'd have won them 3 games, which would have given us 6 points, we'd have been asking questions of Manchester United and also of Leeds United. As it happened in the end, Manchester United won the league. But Tommy Docherty really could have done the treble. He was close, very close.
Well, he was. The history seemed to repeat itself with Tommy, didn't he? He did this at several other clubs. But one of the lads said to me after the Blackpool thing, a couple of years after, I was talking to them about it, and they said Tommy only sent the lads home because they didn't invite him along. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in that, but I can imagine there's a lot of truth in that, Jim.
Well, there could have been, because we had a lot of trips with Chelsea. We'd gone to training one day and then bring your passports in tomorrow, we're going away. And you never knew. We were going everywhere. But, I mean, nobody had more dealings with Tommy Docherty than myself. He tried to sign me when I was 15 before I went to Leeds. He signed me for Chelsea. He sold me to Sheffield Wednesday. He also, when he was at Chelsea after he sold me, he wanted to buy me back. And he then also signed me for Manchester United, and he picked me for Scotland. So Tommy Docherty, in my mind, is such a complex character, but he was great for young players, Alan. Young players coming through, he was marvellous, but he was very scared, I thought, of experienced players. He was always very wary of them. And, you know, the other way I've explained to him about in my book was that he could look you in the eye and he could tell you a blatant lie and then think that he was in the right because he was doing it for the club and for the best thing for the club. So that was Tommy Docherty. You know, I mean, funny guy. You could laugh with him all day, all night. I've had loads of laughs with him. But like I said, very ruthless. Never forget that. Tommy Docherty would chop you in without even talking about it. And he did that with me at Manchester United. And I knew what was happening. I knew what was going on. And, you know, there was no reason for me to leave Man United. I'd been doing well at Man United, Alan, but I wasn't getting on with the assistant manager. And me and him had had a few rocks. And he made a decision, Tommy Docherty, and I was gone. He says, Laurie McMenemy's been on the phone, wants to talk to you. I've given him permission to let you go and talk to him. And I thought, what do I do? I didn't want to leave Man U, but I thought, well, if he doesn't want me, I might as well go and see what Laurie's got to say. And I went down and spoke to Laurie and had a good chat with him. And it was partly the big thing really was that Ozzy, Laurie said to me, said that both Mickey and Ozzy wanted me to go to Southampton. And that might have been a bit of bluff. It might have been a bit of chat. But that convinced me to go to Southampton.
Can we just,
Well,
Jim,
absolutely.
can I just take you back to your time at Chelsea and how that ended? Obviously, you went to Sheffield Wednesday, and I'm sure some Chelsea fans of my vintage would like to know a bit about. You mentioned the Liverpool Cup semi-final in '65, and of course, you were playing for Sheffield Wednesday against Chelsea in the '66 semi-final.
Yes, yeah. The what had happened at the club really was it was a good situation for Tommy Docherty because he had me pushing the first team players because I could play midfield as in Terry Venable's position or Johnny Hollands' position, and I could also play as a striker up front. So Tommy Docherty was having the best of everything, but I wanted to play regular football. And the thing was, after the Blackpool night on carry on, and the way it affected the team and all the rest of it, I felt my career was better somewhere else. It was a horrible decision, but it was a decision that, though I was a young boy, it was a decision I made. And I asked for a transfer 3 times before Tommy Docherty let me go. And he when he let me go, he got a British record fee for a teenager at the time. So I think that was a big influence on it. But, I love my time at Chelsea, fond memories of Chelsea, love going back to the bridge. Chelsea have had some great players, including the gentleman that we're talking with, Alan. Johnny was a good player for Chelsea, worked hard for Chelsea. So, yeah, to the Chelsea fans, that was what it was about. It was about me furthering my career. And I said before that when I left Chelsea, I got to the final of the FA Cup final 7 months later. And then 18 months later, I was in the full international team for Scotland. So for me, in a personal point of view, it's the best decision I ever made.
Before before we go on to that wonderful game against England that you played and scored, Jim, what happened at Leeds? Why did Leeds let you go at such a young age?
The thing was with Leeds, Alan, me and Peter Lorimer had played for Scotland schoolboys together, and we both signed for Leeds United. And funnily enough, I didn't know Peter had signed, and Peter didn't know I'd signed. But we ended up at Leeds. I went to Leeds, Alan. I got a great contract for a 15-year-old kid. It was amazing. My family, I was brought up in a place called the Gorbals in Glasgow, which was a tough area. But nevertheless, we didn't want for anything. My parents were amazing. But the thing was, there was quite a lot of clubs kept coming to my door, and my mum and dad weren't too sure who they were, but they were writing down who was coming to the door to see if I would go and join their clubs. And a little bit of savvy from myself, I thought, well, yeah, and then I kept getting more and more involved in it, and I could see what money they were offering. And Leeds offered me a fortune, Alan.
Really?
An absolute fortune. I got £9,000 in cash, which was 1961. I got £14 a week, my wages. £2 went to Clubhouse. My parents got out of Glasgow and came to Leeds with me. And they had a clubhouse, and I paid the rent for the clubhouse. And they got my dad a job. And it was a fantastic move for us, Alan, because there was 5 in the family plus mum and dad. And it set my mum and dad up. It really did. They going from, week in, week out, day to day type of thing, but always doing their best for the family. The money was fantastic. But the thing that also enticed me to Leeds was Don Revie and the way he talked about football. Don Revie was a very skillful footballer, and when he talked football, I was very, very, very interested. And I'd actually gone to Leeds for a little bit of an Easter break, and I checked it out. And me and Freddie, my brother, who you know, Alan, who sadly has passed away, me and Freddie went down to Leeds, and we were in this lovely hotel. I was 14 and Freddie was 13, and we were on our own, and it was quite amazing. And you know, that was Don Revie. He was quite thorough, but also while I was there, they were having a look at me as well, and I was very conscious of that. So whatever I was doing, I was very careful and making sure I was doing things right. But there was quite a few players there. One in particular who you would know, Alan, from your Stoke days was there, and that was Jimmy Greenhoff.
Yeah, yeah.
And me and Jimmy were good pals. I don't know why we were good pals, but we were very. Our ability seemed to be very similar. We were both two-footed. We could head a ball. We could shoot. You know, we could score goals or we could lay on goals. And I got on really well with Jimmy. But Jimmy said to me years later, we were at a sportsman's dinner and we were having a chat, and he says, "The nose, pal." I didn't understand a word they were saying when you were at Leeds. And I says, "Jimmy, I've got news for you. I didn't understand a word you were saying." And Jimmy,
I thought it was I just
said,
thought it was me and him, Jim. It's me and you as him as well. Yeah.
Jimmy was great. Jimmy was probably the one of the most promising kids in the club, and they were you know, there was big things they were thinking for Jimmy, but Jimmy just wasn't a Leeds player, Alan.
No.
Jimmy
I know
wouldn't.
why.
Jimmy could handle himself, but he wouldn't put the boot in.
Yeah.
And that kind of, and then when Jimmy left and went to Birmingham City, but that was a great move for him because it got him back then to Stoke. And Jimmy was a great player. You know, I couldn't believe how he didn't play more games for England, Alan.
Well, he never played one, Jim.
Well, exactly.
You know, he was a fantastic player. I'll make you right there, and I can imagine you two playing together. But why did you leave Leeds, Jim?
Well, in the course of him giving me all this money, he said he told me when I was 17, and if I signed professional, he told me what he would give me. So I had that to come as well. But one day I was waiting for the bus after training one afternoon, and Don Revie pulled up in the car, and he wound the window down. He says, "Come on, Jim, I'll give you a lift." Well, I wasn't that kind of guy. I wasn't a sook. I didn't want anybody to see me near a manager or in the manager's office. That wasn't me. And he says, "Come on, I'll give you a lift." I says, "No," I said, "It's okay, boss. I just get my bus. I'm fine. Bus is just coming now." Right. Anyway, he opened the door. He says, "Come on." He says, get in and sit down." So we sat down and we were talking for a little bit. And I was about, I would be 17 in the September. And I thought, this is the chance. I'll talk to him. And I said to him, I says, "Will you be signing me when I'm 17, boss, professional?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "There's no doubt about it at all." And I said, "All right, great." I says, "And will you be giving me what you promised me when I was 15 to get me away from the other clubs?" And he must have thought I'd forgotten it. And he said, he said, "What?" And like I said, I told him what it was. He says, "Jim, Bobby Collins doesn't get that." So Bobby Collins was the captain of Leeds then, before Bremner and Giles. It was Bremner and Bobby Collins, and Bobby Collins was a fantastic little footballer. And he said, Bobby Collins doesn't get that. Anyway, I never said another word, Alan. I just sat there. We drove the car. He drove the car and he dropped me off outside the house. I didn't say anything to him, really. And he said, I'll see you tomorrow. And he drove off. And I stood there, and to myself, I said, don't think so. And I went in the house, and my mum seen me come in, and she was kind of thought, why is the boss dropping him off? Is he in trouble? So I went into the house, and my mum says, you okay, Jim? I said, yeah, I'm okay, Mum. And I grabbed the ball and I went out in the garden, and Freddie was upstairs. Freddie come downstairs, and we were out in the back garden kicking the ball about. I was thinking everything over and all the rest of it. Anyway, my mum says, are you going to talk to your dad when he comes in? I said, yeah, I have to do, Mum, because it involves us all. And my dad come in from work, and my dad said, what's wrong, Jim? I said, I've got some bad news. And he said, what's that? I said, I'm getting the train to Glasgow tomorrow. And he says, well, okay. He says, what's happened? He said, Mum's told us that your manager dropped you off. He said, are you in trouble? I said, no, I don't do trouble. And he says, what's happened then? I says, well, remember when I signed, he promised me I would get this and that when I was 17. I've just had a chat with him in the car, and he's made a joke about it that the club captain doesn't get it. I said, I'm finished with Leeds, Dad. I'm away tomorrow. And he says, right, okay, can we talk about this a wee bit later? I says, yeah, of course we can. And we talked about it later. I says, no, I said, if he's lied to me now, Dad, he'll lie to me again. I said, no. I said, I've not done anything wrong. Not at all. I said, Manchester United came after I gave my word to go to Leeds, and I turned down Manchester United, and I wanted to go to Manchester United. I said I was true to Don Revie, and he wasn't true to me. I said, so tomorrow morning, if it's okay with you, I'm going to get the bus and the bus and the train, and I'm going to go up and stay at Auntie Bridie's and Uncle Eddie's, and I'll go to the press and I'll talk to the press and see if I can get things moving along. And my dad said, that's okay. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I know I've brought you all down there. I said, it's killing me that we've come down here, but I'll fix it. I'll get myself sorted with a club. So my dad said, right, okay, son. So the next morning I got the train to Glasgow. And as soon as I got to Glasgow, I went to my auntie and my uncle's. And then about half an hour later, I walked into Glasgow, went to the Daily Record, the Daily Express, and I told these two reporters that I knew. They were well known in Glasgow, and I told them what had happened, that I'd left Leeds. Without going into the detail that I've told you now, I didn't say what was the big reason. But Leeds said the reason was that I was homesick, but I wasn't homesick. It was that he lied to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
today, Jim, that would be an absolute bombshell, wouldn't it?
Oh, Alan, you imagine we've got a lovely house. We've got everything sorted out. My brothers, my sisters at school. My dad's got a job. We've got out of the gobbles. So my mum and dad had to come back, and they went over to Ireland. And in between times, the two paper reporters came up trumps. Tommy Docherty was going to ring me that night. And I was also going to, Sean Fallon at Celtic, the assistant manager, was coming to see me at my auntie and uncle's house. So I all started buzzing. And of course, Tommy Docherty tried to get me to go to Chelsea as well. But I turned down Tommy Docherty because I was going to Leeds as well. So I spoke to Tommy Docherty and he told me what was going on, and I said, "That's great, smashing." So he said, "What I'll do is," he said, "I'll send you your tickets, and you can bring your mum or your dad with you, whichever one. You have to bring one of them." And I think it was about 3 weeks later, I went down to Chelsea, and I signed for Chelsea.
Great story,
Yeah.
mate. Great story.
Oh,
It's
that's
great to know. It's great to know, Jim, that you're a pretty straight shooter, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't tell people lies, Alan, type of thing,
Yeah.
and I didn't expect them
Yeah.
to, especially in important people like the manager of your football
Yeah.
club and where you want to make your career. But you know, it's all part of
I
my
suppose what I'm
DNA.
trying to say is, I asked you, you know, because you've had, wherever you've been, you've done really well. You're a great player in my eyes. You've been in a couple of cup finals with different teams, won it. And as I say, I made a note here. Why you had so many moves? Because you seem the kind of person. All my moves is because of falling out with people, management and coaches. You know.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've said what you've said today, because that makes me feel a little bit better. You know.
Well,
I don't
got
feel like I'm the only one on earth. You know.
Yeah, but
But
the thing I'm getting over in the book, really, Alan, is that football's a wonderful sport. It's enhanced my life so much, but there's pitfalls, there's ups and downs. You don't get it going straight. There's all sorts. Your family to contend with, your supporters. You know, it's a wonderful life, but you've got to stay. Sometimes you've got to be dead strict. Sometimes you've got to have a laugh. Sometimes you've got to cry. So
yeah.
it's a
Jim,
wonderful.
Jim, can I mean, there's so many elements of your career I'd like to get into, but obviously we're limited in terms of time. We kept you on here a long time already, but
No
there's a
problem.
couple
We'll
of
come
things.
back. We'll do part two. Go on.
Yeah, there's a couple of things we have to touch upon. I mean, we've got to talk about that day in at Wembley in 1967 when the world champions were dethroned by your team, by your Scotland team. Tell us about that game.
Yeah, well, the thing was, it was a week. It was a week leading up to it, Tony. The thing was, we were in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, Sheffield Wednesday, and we were playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and we lost 1-0 in extra time. Big Tony Haley headed one down, and Tommy Baldwin stuck it away. And I left Chelsea Stamford Bridge. I left there absolutely deflated. I thought we're going to go back to the cup final again. And of course, Chelsea went through. If any other team, I think I'd have been a wee bit more annoyed, but as it was Chelsea, that was okay because they'd missed 2 semis anyway. But the thing was, they were picking the Scotland team, and they used to pick it a week before the game. So they would let the clubs know first, believe it or not, before the players. And I got back to Sheffield after the game, went out with my pals, had a good night out, sitting in the house on a Sunday morning, and the phone went. And I picked up the phone, and it was Tommy Docherty. And I thought, oh dear, what's this? So he says, Jimmy Mac, he says, you've been picked for Scotland. You're playing against England next week. So I says, oh, right, okay, thanks, boss. But I didn't know if somebody were taking the piss, Alan. Honestly, I wasn't too sure. Well, I had a shit day all day thinking about this. knew I was on the verge of it, that it wasn't 100%, but I knew I was very, very close. And I had a day out on the Sunday. I had a girlfriend then, I took her out, and she told me weeks later, she said, that was the miserablest day out I've had with you ever. I said, I'm really sorry, but I said that was all on my mind. I didn't know if Tommy Docherty were taking the piss or what. And anyway, I went to training the next day on the Monday, and I went into the dressing room. I was sat in the dressing room getting ready, and the next thing, one of the coaches popped their head in the dressing room and said, Jimmy Mac, the boss wants to see you. So all the boys were there. Oh, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? So I went out into his office, and when I went in, he had a huge smile on his face, and he says, I'm just like to congratulate you, Jim. You're playing for Scotland against England on Saturday at Wembley. You've deserved the honour. Go out and show them what you can do. And I said, thanks very much. And he took me in the dressing room and he told all the players. And it was quite emotional, Alan. You know, I was the only Scotsman in the dressing room. And I was going to click.
No, Eddie played with you that game, didn't he? Did Eddie play, Jim?
Yeah, he did.
So why didn't he call you both in together? Was he trying to steal the thunder, Tommy?
No, he was manager at Celtic, Alan, and I was at Sheffield Wednesday at Celtic Chelsea, and he was just ringing me on the phone. I don't know how he got my number either.
All right, okay.
But it was just Tommy Docherty's way. Probably he probably got to know because they would have rang him and told them that Eddie was in the team. So he's probably thought he would ring me and let me know. But I was thinking, I'm not too sure, you know, what he said. Could he be kidding me on or whatever? Anyway, on the Wednesday was a wonderful surprise for me because they told you what the team was. The team was actually picked, and I was in the team. I wasn't in the squad. I was in the team. And on the Wednesday, Sheffield Wednesday was playing Manchester United, and the press in Scotland had rang me and said, "Look, is there any chance that you can get a photo with Dennis Law before the England game, because you're going to be playing together on Saturday?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to do that." I'd never met Dennis. It was, you know, and he was one of my heroes, Alan. Do you know what I mean? He was a magic player. And I was really nervous about meeting him. And that night we had a photograph, me and Dennis, before the game. And he says, "I'll see you after the game." We shook hands. It was 2 each. It was a good game, actually, at Hillsborough. And he said after the game, like, we shook hands, and he said, "Look forward to seeing you over the weekend when we were playing England." I seriously, Alan, and this is no detriment to the England team, I was more nervous about meeting Dennis Law than I was to play against England. I really was, honestly. And I remember the other thing that really struck me, Alan, was that we after the game, the next morning I got the train to London. Got to London and went into the hotel and all the players were there. And Jim Baxter, who I'd never really met either, he got up out of his seat and come over and put his arm around me and said, "You're okay, son, don't worry about it, just give the ball to me." And he says, "Come and meet the guys." And Dennis was there and he's drinking his usual cup of tea. He got up and we had a wee hug and what have you. And it was great. But Alan, you know when you're in an environment that's right. We had 4 players that were going to win the European Cup, right? With Celtic, with Ronnie McKinnon and John Gregg, probably two of their best players ever. we had 5 Anglos. There was Dennis Law, Billy Bremner, Eddie McCready, myself, and who was the other one? Jim Baxter. Jim Baxter moved down to England. So the team was full of confidence. I know England had won the World Cup, and I was chuffed because being a Scotsman, earning my trade down in England couldn't be better for me, because the boost that it gave to the game was really quite amazing. And I know they had great players in the team, i.e. Bobby Charlton, Bobby Moore, and Banksy, and I liked Ray Wilson. I always thought Ray Wilson was class. So, you know, it was. I just didn't feel like I was coming up against the world champions. So I felt so comfortable. I was relaxed in everything. And then when we came to play England, we played well on the day. I know Big Jackie got a knock and he suffered a bit, but it was a great win for us, and it was a great debut for myself. And you know, it was a dream come true. That was what I wanted to do from being a kid. I remember going over the bowling greens in Glasgow, and we used to put our jackets down and put something down for a goal, and we used to play, and we used to say, like, you know, I want to play at Wembley against England and beat them, and you know what I mean? And but it was like Roy, honestly, it was like Roy of the Rover stuff. It really was. It came very quick, Alan, but you know, with having the cup final appearance, and then I had, in between that, before I got my cap, I had 2 under-23 games. I played against Wales and Wrexham. They weren't very good, to be honest, and we gubbed them 6-0, and I scored a couple. And then we played England at St James's Park, and England had a good team then. Aussie wasn't in the side then, just then, and but they had a good team, and they were all playing there, all the best young players of England, and we beat England 3-1 at Newcastle, and I got the first one. So, you know, I was on a high, and like I said, once I met the lads, and then I played the game, I never felt any nerves. I wasn't nervous at all. I loved the game. I didn't want it to stop. I wanted it to carry on and on and on. And England were great. They really were. I mean, I totally loved Bobby Moore. I talked to Bobby Moore quite a lot of times. I talked to Jimmy Greaves, who had actually played in the game. That was the only change England had. Roger Hunt didn't play. Alf Ramsey picked Jimmy Greaves. And it was just undescribable, the colour, and everything like it. But the funniest thing was the manager, after the game, we went back to the hotel, we got changed, and we went and we met the England players in the Savoy Hotel, which I thought was a fantastic idea. And we met them and we had a drink with them, and then we went off uptown. But our manager was a new manager. He was a debutant. It was his first game, same as myself. And he went outside to get a bit of fresh air. And he was stood outside the Savoy Hotel just getting a gulp of fresh air. And this Scottish supporter come along and started pinning him with his finger and pushing his finger into his chest. And he was saying, "We beat you today. We hammered you today. We're the bloody champions of the world." And he's like that, and he's getting all this. And he didn't have the heart to say, "Why don't you fuck off and just, leave me alone. I'm the Scottish manager. I know fine well what's happened." And when I read that story with Bobby Brown, I thought that was an amazing story. It's a good day out. But Alan, the thing was, Scottish people used to every 2 years save up to go to Wembley and see the bars, the pubs. They used to have tick books behind the bar, and when they were flush, they would give them the money behind the bar for the 2 years, and they'd go down to London, and they'd be in 5-star hotels, and they'd be riding around in limousines because they'd saved up for 2 years, and they did it every year. So it was a big occasion for Scotland supporters. So, they just lost their heads when when things go well for them.
Unbelievable story.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're
all the way through that, you got to think to yourself, which is one thing. I mean, I was very fortunate when I went to Arsenal. I was very fortunate to come across Jock Stein. Celtic were on tour with us, Arsenal, and I spent a few days with Jock. I went to Sydney races with him and spent some time talking to him. I was totally taken back by him. He reminded me so much of my boss Waddington at Stoke. It was, what a great man. And it makes you wonder how the Scottish national team, especially after listening to you and the players you had in that game, Jimmy would have been getting a little bit too long in the tooth then, Jimmy Baxter. Yeah, he was. Would he have been down at Forest then, Jim?
Yeah, he was at Forest. I think the worst thing that happened to Jim Baxter, he was playing at Rangers. They were playing a match. I'll never forget this. He was playing in Austria for Rangers, and I don't know whether it was. I can't remember if it was a friendly or it was some kind of a match of some importance. But towards the end of the game, he was taking the piss out of him as he usually does, and a guy done him proper, and he fractured his ankle.
Oh, really?
And to be honest, and I spoke to him later days, and he said after I had fractured my ankle for Rangers out in Austria, I wasn't the same player again.
No.
But he was an amazing player, Alan. When he was coming through Rangers, I mean, he was just so good on the ball. He was a great player to play with. He always wanted the ball. Didn't go and hide or anything like that. He was always available. Give me the ball. Let's, and then pass it and probably the most confident player I ever played with.
Yeah. Eddie told me the story about it, 67 when you was leaving the dressing room. The buzzer went and Eddie said, "I've never been so nervous in all my life." Eddie was a bundle of nerves anyway.
Yeah, he was.
And he said, "I'm standing next to Jim Baxter," and he said he's bouncing the ball, and he said to me, "How much do you want to win today, son?" And Eddie looked up at him and he went, "Oh," he said, "I'd die for this today if we could get a result." And he went, "Well, we will win." He said, "You just keep kicking that little ginger fella, and when you get the ball, give it to me and we will win." It was that simple, and off he walked down the tunnel,
Yeah. It was,
fantastic.
Yeah, because when we were in the dressing room, the manager, like I said, he was a new manager. He wasn't going to have a team talk, and he was kind of going around talking to the players. And he'd come to me and he just said to me, "Just go and do what you do at Sheffield Wednesday, son, and that'll be good enough for me." And for whatever reason, just before we were going to go out the dressing room, he started to talk, and like you said, Baxter had the ball in his hands. So all Baxter did then, there was concrete floor then in the dressing room, and Baxter got the ball. And as soon as the manager went to talk, he started bouncing. He says, "Aye, great, boss, magic. Come on, lads, let's go." And I'm sat in the dressing room, and I'm thinking, do I listen to the manager or do I listen to Baxter? Because all the players were following him, and I thought, I'm going with Baxter for the first time in my life. I did what I wouldn't do, and I went with Baxter, and all we could hear was Bobby Brown, the manager, shouting, "Good luck, lads! Good luck, lads!" And Baxter's off. He was tremendous, fantastic lad, and I never know him this confident. Dennis wasn't like that. Dennis was a different. Once he went on the field, Dennis was a different person. Off the field, Dennis was quiet and very humble. He wouldn't, he wouldn't push himself into this being the centre of attraction. He'd walk in gently, and a fabulous player. I loved watching Dennis though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, Jim, I think we're almost out of time now. As Alan said earlier, there's so many elements to your career that we haven't touched upon today. I think we're going to have to do a part 2, because I mean we need to talk about your involvement in the 1976 FA Cup final. We need to talk about your time at Manchester United. There's so many other things that we need to talk about, but sadly we've run out of time today.
Okay.
It's been great listening to your stories. Alan, have you got one final word to send to Jim for today before we adjourn?
Well, I've never said so little on one of my podcasts, but that's purely respect, and I loved you at the bridge. I thought I was going to play with you at the bridge, Jim, when I was a kid. I can't say I was shocked when you left, because your emotions then, it's all about what you do, but all in my career, I've always followed your career, because and you telling me earlier that you nearly signed for Stoke, Waddington want you. I'm not surprised about that. And there's always, whenever I pick my favourite teams and favourite players, I always pick myself in it, who I'd like to play with. And it's not a regret, but I just wish you'd have stayed at Chelsea a bit longer and we could have played together.
Yeah,
I think that would have been a great coming into the team with you as well. And if Charlie would have come in, Charlie was in the team as well, I think that wouldn't have been a bad midfield, me, you and Charlie Cook.
I'd have loved that as well, Alan, because I'm a big admirer of yourself as a footballer, and I've always liked players that play total football. I call it total football, and I think you're definitely in that bracket, and it's been a joy to watch you playing.
Thanks, mate.
Brilliant.
It's a joy to have you on the show as well, Jim.
Brilliant.
Fabulous.
It's my pleasure, and if
I'm just glad the boilers couldn't turn up.
Give us a call. It's not a problem.
All right, mate. We will do. We will do, Jim. We'll do part 2. Thanks, pal.
Cheers, Alan. Cheers, Tony. Thanks
a lot, Jim.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Bye.